Right, hello guys, I'm going to share with you today my rather long story, but in a very short summarised way, with my Citroen Relay 2012 2.2 Ford diesel engined van. So my problem started with it going into limp mode on a P0115 engine coolant temperature sensor circuit fault. That reset, and then incrementally it kept coming on until you could only drive until the engine got warm. And then it would basically trip into limp mode. What I did is, of course, I replaced the temperature sensor circuit sensor first. They look like that. This one's tie wrapped here, so I could have a one to compare with in the engine bay. The actual sensor itself is just down at the back, just where the end of my blue finger is there. With a grey plug on it. So the obvious first thing to do was to replace that. Made no difference, of course. It was exactly the same fault. So I took it to a van specialist who ran two diagnostics on it, because these are notoriously sort of bad for throwing different fault codes for not the actual fault. So but he confirmed that in his belief, running two different engine diagnostics, was that either it was that or the wiring in between. Identified a little bit of rubbing on the loom here, so I unpicked the loom and replaced the cable, leaving just a couple of inches on at each end, and soldered a new cable in. As he suggested, if it wasn't that, he did suggest trying the ECU. So I got a new ECU from the ECU doctor in Plymouth, who were very good. You basically send them your old unit, they clone it onto a donor unit, and then send you them both back. If the new unit doesn't work, they just charge you like 100 and something quid for restocking, because of course it wasn't the ECU, and of course it was nothing to do with the engine temperature sensor circuit fault. Anyway, but what I found out is that I could drive the van around with full power if the engine never meant temperature. So as an interim measure, which I would only advise if you are very confident that you know what you're doing and everything works properly, is I just had it loose in the engine bay and was driving around, because the engine was then just on warm-up mode. It wasn't ever seeing proper temperature in the ECU itself. It was just seeing the engine compartment temperature. And then that started to show up what the actual genuine fault was. Because the DPF went on to the very high mode, and it was telling me on the dashboard, keep the vehicle moving, and there was a little orange light in between the dials of it spraying diesel into the exhaust. But of course the DPF wasn't actually regenning, so I thought it was all a bit strange. So I took it to Citroen, who were in main dealer way very unhelpful. They sort of gave me a £4,000 proposed quote to replace the DPF, and then see what happened from there. Anyway, I did speak to the actual technician who did the work, so he said, well, you can try regenning the DPFs. So I watched an O'Reilly's video on the internet, bought the same stuff as he used, because I couldn't get anybody locally to do this. It was quite expensive, but it certainly seemed to do the job. I also bought myself a new engine diagnostics, but you can borrow them off garages or potentially friends if they've got one. That highlighted the fact that the DPF was blocked. It wasn't seeming to regen correctly. Now that tends to point towards the vaporizer on these vans. You can watch some O'Reilly's videos on YouTube of how to do the launch clean system, because by this time I was also getting the P0115BE in brackets 73 code, which is obviously it says it's the relay not working correctly, but whether it was or not, I don't know. But because it's a common fault, I took out the some people call it the vaporizer or the fifth injector, So basically, this is the component here. It's just before the DPF filter on the exhaust. They're a bit tricky to get out because of this nut's a bit yeah, gets seized in anyway. Been in an exhaust for 12 years. What I found on mine is you can just see there the wire had just started to rub through on something, and I suspect that was blipping it into a fault occasionally. But for some reason on mine it never blew the fuse. But what I did do as a precaution, I've obviously bought a new one of these, and then I've also I replaced this relay. So on mine it's this one. You can see it's a slightly different colour actually. I bought that one off eBay, off Coastal Motorhomes. They're only like £7. And then the other thing that some people recommended on the internet was to just try the circuit with a light bulb attached. So I've just cooked up an old lamp there and used the plug. Now I was measuring and getting 12 volt with my multimeter on there, but what I suspect has happened is the inside, this is, well, I'm going to call this the plug, and then the socket's the other end. Inside the socket, I think the cores might be slightly damaged, because even with my new vaporizer in and the new relay, it was still being problematic. But since plugging this lamp in, unplugging it, measuring it again, and then plugging the new vaporizer back in, it has all started working again. The other thing that I randomly got was I did get a MAF sensor code. So I did replace that, but of course that made no difference as well. And I've also got a P0670 pre-post heater unit fault, which again the guy at Citroen did say, well, that could have something to do with the DPF as well. So that's one of these modules here. It sits underneath the headlight there. Oops, so I replaced just there down in the back. I replaced that as well, but I've still got that fault because my glow plug unit 1, or glow plug on cylinder 1 has burnt out. So that's a bit of a potted history through this van, but in summary, I would always look at these common faults, which is the vaporizer, this relay, and the associated 20 amp fuse. Now I can't remember which fuse that is, but as I said, my fuse never popped, but it did underneath here. The grey plastic that it sits into is slightly melted, but however that doesn't seem to have affected the operation of it. It's just been an issue that you can tell excessive current's gone through. You can drop some messages in the bottom underneath the video, but this is my first YouTube video and I'm not that sort of keen on replying to millions of questions, but drop us a message if you've got any questions. Other than that, good luck. I think these vans are, you know, they are what they are. A complete random collection of electronics on them makes them difficult to diagnose, but seem pretty good unit apart from that. See you later.